Hello, welcome. Join us for Painting with Nexus Ward. Enthusiast or expert, everybody is welcome. We are doing a watercolor portrait of the inspirational Emma Watson. Please enjoy. If you would like to help in bringing exposure to the channel, please like and subscribe. We are starting with a very basic sketch. A sketch is just guideline markers that you need to create your piece of artwork. Marks to indicate the edge of the face, the top of the head, the placement of the ears, eyes, nose and lips. The most basic of sketch can be just a simple mark on the paper, if any is used at all. You can also sketch with paint, which has the advantage of being invisible once layered, and does not show like pencil or ink marks might. It might be tempting to create a very detailed sketch. Remember that this will all probably be covered up with oil paint. So the only things that we need are the guides we need for painting. With watercolor, any sketch that we make is going to be visible to show through the transparent layers, and any marks that we put in are going to show in the final watercolor itself. Of course, you can also use this to your advantage. If you want your marks to be visible in the final painting, waterproof inks are bleed resistant and make very good combinations for watercolor. For this piece, we will be using minimalist pencil sketching, which will be visible in the final piece without distracting from the face. Shading will be completely provided by the paint tones, so I am only applying the most basic of contour lines. We don't need all the contour lines, just our guidelines. Here you see me redrawing the eyes 3 different times. The face is the most important part of the painting, and the eyes are the most important part of the face. The eyes are the things that people relate to the most. They are sometimes described as the window to the soul. If the eyes are beautiful, then even with the face of a monster, the painting will be good. And if the face is good, even with the most abstract, the most bizarre main painting, people will still relate to your painting. This effect is so strong that even in everyday objects, people see the likeness of people's faces. Called pareidolia, humans are hardwired to see patterns in nature, seeing eyes, faces and expressions in our surroundings and inanimate objects. You'll see me doing something unusual here, which I picked up from watercolor, orienting the painting any direction it needs to be, not only for your paint, but for your hand to achieve the brush stroke that you want. In watercolor, the paint flows the direction of gravity. By turning the painting, you turn gravity. Here we are starting the watercolor with the general idea of going from least detailed to most detailed, and in this instance working from the center of the painting outwards. Watercolor landscapes often take a very different approach, working from the top using gravity to pull washes of paint and water, directing the edges where the paint flows. We'll be using a combination of liquid watercolor tubes and hardened pigment blocks. Both will work. I find the tubes to be faster for larger sections to save time on dissolving the hard pigment. For very small quantities of paint, however, either method will work well. Most flesh tones can be made with the red to yellow color spectrum. Browns are made by mixing across the color wheel, usually a secondary color with a primary color. For example, working with orange, adding blue from across the color wheel in small amounts will produce brown. This can be a red brown, yellow brown, even a violet brown. Or we can make brown by simply introducing black or gray anywhere in the red-yellow color spectrum. Medium yellow, red, and burnt sienna will be used for the eyes, with only very slight amounts of violet and green for the eyeshadow-like skin tones. Crimson is used for the lips and the face, adding water to achieve lighter pinker tones. Both watercolor and oil color have a very long time in which you can continue to manipulate the pigment. So, we do not need to worry about rushing to apply our carefully mixed colors before they dry. With acrylic paint, you have a very fast drying time, a double-edged sword that requires colors to be remixed each time if they are a different color. We build the shape of the face with a series of washes. In miniature painting, washes flow into the textured details. On illustration artboard, you can think of it like building a puddle. Usually you start with sponging vivid color from your brush onto the edge of your puddle. You can do it with water if you want it light or clear. Then during the process, you load your brush again with a very moist mixture of either color or water and expand the edges of the puddle. Continuing the wash technique all the way to the end will give you sharp edges. This can be either vivid or more clear. If you want a soft edge, you can use a dry paintbrush to soak up the edge of the layer. Or wait for it to dry and come back in with a clean wet brush to soften the edge. Because watercolor is water-soluble, it remains workable even after it has dried on your painting. Now, while this puddle is wet, you have a few moments to manipulate the color. You can direct the colors already there, you can soak up some to lighten the color, or you could add more color to sections of the puddle. With the watercolor glazes, I am blending only a single color with water. It is possible to add color in the middle of a glaze, either be just changing colors as you expand the glaze, or adding pigment to the still wet parts of the glaze. This last effect, if you leave the paint to naturally spread on the wet surface, will create its own unique pattern similar to the shape of lightning, how it branches out. Working with this while it is still wet, you can direct the flow of it with the amount of water you have on your brush. A wet brush will release its moisture, making the pigment flow outwards. A neutral brush can be used to push and mix the pigments when the moisture of the brush matches the area it is being applied to, and paint is neither added nor removed. A less moist brush will wick up paint when you apply it, which can be useful for softening edges or lightening a shade. In this instance, we are going to let the glazes dry before applying more pigment layers. Once you apply a glaze, it moistens the layers below it, and if come in with a brush at this point, you will be working with all the layers that have been applied and not just the glaze layer. The reason we are letting the glaze dry is so that we do not lose details. Working with a wet section is like working with a wet palette. It softens the details. The colors mix together instead of layer on top of another. It's a useful technique. We use it today to make small corrections, while building the painting from least detail to most. There, how's that? We not only have variations between light and dark. Color changes across a surface. Skin has many colors. Not just one skin tone under light and shadow, but blood and veins, tan lines, flushed skin. With oil painting, I start with the eyes and work out. With watercolor, I work from the least to most detail. So I start the eyes once the foundations of color are laid down on the edges, so the skin will not blur the details. The nose has hard edges along the bottom of the nose, and the rest are semi-soft edges on the cleft of the lips and the bridge of the nose. Just doing a very basic gesture on the lips, so I can fill in more detail later. Just a very fast, very light violet shade gives us the three-dimensional shape of the eye. This is an effect called dualing. Let's start with blending amber highlight into deeper red-brown tones for the natural hazel color of the iris, making sure to leave the highlights as bare paper. The black pupil and shadows we very carefully blend and soften the edge where it blends into the hazel iris. And the contrast between the very dark pupil and naked paper create the sensation of a bright reflection on intense color. You can do very broad gestural strokes for eyelashes and eyebrows. The trick is not to overdo the effect, using it as an accent to frame the eye, similar to applying eyeliner. I'm doing very fine strokes to mimic the effect of individual groups of hairs. This takes more time, but creates a genuine feel as your brush follows the path of human hair. So, we've got a few techniques that we'll go over. You may have heard of some of them before. We are starting off with a watercolor-based underpainting. You can use any type of underpainting you want. Acrylic works very well. Or even no underpainting at all, the alla prima technique. The underpainting is very similar to the sketch in that parts of it are visible in the finished work, and that it acts as a guide for the layers above it. The entire goal of this underpainting is to provide default color. Color that can be tinted with glazes, providing adjustment to large areas of lighting without covering up the details. That if the oil layer is semi-transparent, that it is not white paper that shows through, but vivid color that interacts with the layers above it. An underpainting frees us from having to mix colors so thick that they need to be opaque to be their true color. It lets us focus on the hue of the color, lets us focus our attention on mixing the right color, and frees us from worrying about coverage. The color that's on there is the color that's going to show through. And once we have the right hue, we can achieve our color with a single oil layer versus needing to apply thicker layers or wait for the layer to dry enough that it will have limited mixing with the layers above it. Coming back, this is intended to be a watercolor underpainting for oil paint. The detail that is being added to the face, the freckles, are all going to disappear under the first layer of oil paint, even though the oil layer is semi-transparent. Just like the skin changes colors, the freckles change tone across the face, shifting along the same color spectrum as the cheeks, more pink towards the center and light brown towards the edges. The detail on the lips are very similar to eyelashes, dark at the edge, and using the same brush strokes to draw the color to make the dark folds of the skin. It helps create depth to the lips. The detail on the lips will also be lost during the oil painting step, where on the lips I start with the detail and paint out. The neck shares the same principles as the face, working from least to most detail. Since we have the face done first, it acts as a color guide for the rest of skin. For hair, imagine the shape, imagine the volume of the hair. This will give you the light and shadow. If you're not sure, take a look at reference images, look for a feel that you like. The hair for this painting should flow like silk curtains in the wind. We'll have some fun and make the hair a little wispy at the end. We are going to save the details for the eyes. We want the focus to be on the face. Human eyes see the most detail in the area they are focused on. Everything else falls to your peripheral vision. You're not going to see a lot of detail. For brunette hair, we are doing gold-yellow undertones and building the darker details on top. The far side of the face has red undertones, where the hair on the rest gets brown undertones. Keep in mind the highlights of the hair and the direction your light sources are coming from. With watercolor, if you are using natural paper for your white instead of opaque white paint, you will need to start creating the highlights with the dark layers you are applying by defining the edges, and therefore, the highlights. Once we are happy with the main colors of the hair, we can start applying the shadows and the dark details of the hair. The dark details of the hair tend to have hard and blended edged, while the shadows from layers of hair on top of each other have softer edges and smoother blending. The background we are doing is very simple. Start with defining the edge of the hair with dark layer. Focus on the edge instead of covering the paper. It's that easy. Once you have this edge, you can fill in the rest with your desired color. To achieve very dark tones, I suggest waiting for the layer to dry and apply as 2 to 3 layers to achieve the effect you want. And there is our finished watercolor painting. Beautiful, I'm really happy with this one. Thank you for watching the watercolor process with Nexus Ward. If you would like to see the oil painting that continues from here, I'll have it linked so you can check it out. If you liked the video, maybe give it a thumbs up and we'll see you in the next one.